Namaskaram. So let's talk about seventh chapter of the book Karma. Topic of the seventh chapter is Karma Yoga and the physical body. Let's talk about Sutra first. Sutra is, if you take more karmic load now, when you are well and capable, later you will walk hands free. First point is embodying karma. Let us look at how Karma Yoga can be practiced on the level of the very first dimension of the self that we are aware of, the physical body. How is the physical body influenced by karmic memory, and how can we use the physical body to be free of the cyclical bondage of karma? There are many imperceptible ways in which the karmic structure influences and even distorts the physical body. It is not merely your lifestyle, what you eat, what you drink, what you inhale, that has an impact on your body. The subtlest aspects of your thoughts and emotion can also influence the physical. Start with a simple example. You can usually tell if a person is happy or despondent if you look at their face. If you become more observant, you will find that when disturbed, people actually sit or stand differently. Over time, these postures turn habitual and harden into vasanas or tendencies. Now the mind does different things on different days. One day it is joyful, the next day it is depressed, the third day it is stressed. In the process, it is not merely distorting your vision of reality, it is distorting your body as well. Think of all the unexpected things that happen on a daily basis that are not in your control. If every little psychological event were to reshape you, you can imagine how a complete distortion you would have become in few years. The distortion will happen dramatically on an energy level, but it will take time to manifest physiologically. If you look carefully at people who have gone through a certain level of emotional stress recently, you will notice small changes in their physical appearance. Often, if the left eye appears slightly smaller than the right, you can be quite certain that they have been going through some emotional distress in the past 6 months, unless of course they were born that way. That is because the left side of the body is always associated in yoga with the emotional life of the human being, and the feminine dimension symbolized by the moon with its circle of waxing and waning. Depending on the nature of the karmic memory, certain parts of the body also behave in certain ways. You might have noticed this about your own body. You may exercise as much as you can, but one muscle in your body is invariably less cooperative than the other. You may check it out with a doctor or take an MRI. Both will most likely tell you that the muscle is perfectly fine, but your karmic inheritance shapes the skeletal system and musculature in very singular ways. Not every muscle is equally strong or capable. Again, if you pay close attention to the body, you will see that in some parts of the physical system you feel no sensation at all. In other words, there are blocks or gaps in the sensory process. This again is because the karma creates its own structure. Based on this karmic information, the physical body takes a particular shape. Modern medicine is now well aware of the notion of psychosomatic elements. This acknowledges the inseparability of the mental and physical bodies. As we have seen earlier, for every sensation there is a mental fluctuation and a corresponding chemical reaction. The same process also works in reverse. Your physical structure, constitution and general health are decided by this relentless process. This is why yoga works so closely with posture, breath, attitude and intentions. If a certain awareness is brought into these aspects of the self, what is happening in the mind or in the outside world will not affect the body. When you are physiologically distraught, it is particularly important to hold your body consciously, because your karmic substance is trying to shape your body according to its distortions. This explains the enormous care brought into the practice of asanas and pranayam, physical posture and breathing posture in yogas. Next point is karma yoga and asanas. How exactly does the physical dimension of yoga, hatha yoga as it is called, prepare the body to deal with karma? The logic is simple. If you cultivate the body in a certain way, it will actually be capable of taking on more of a karmic load. This is how your accumulated karma, sanchita, transform itself into allotted karma called prarabdha. The estimation of how much of a karmic load you can take on is done by your own innate intelligence. This intelligence will decide the volume of the stock you should handle for this lifetime based on your physical and energetic capability, and of course the karmic balance you have. Certain cycles play out routinely in human life. Around every 12 years, a shift enables you to take on more of a karmic load. The first 12-year cycle begins for a child somewhere between 54 and 108 months, that is between 4 and 9 years of age. Many human beings with a certain sensitivity of life are aware of subtle changes around the cusp of each 12-year phase. These are times of greater receptivity and greater vulnerability, as well as increased possibility, times when changes in life direction often happen. Certain shifts take place during every winter and summer solstice as well. Yogic have traditionally made use of these shifts to increase the amount of karma they can work out. Each cycle of the moon also marks a shift. Those who are into intense yogic sadhana often choose to take on an extra stock of karma on the new moon day. And Aesop's fable illustrates this point beautifully. Wherever a particular master travelled, his servants followed him, disturbing all their luggage among them. Aesop always picked up the heaviest load, although he was not a particularly strong man. All the others picked up the lightest loads because the journey went on for several days, but he always carried the heaviest. One day, his fellow workers asked him, "Why are you doing this? You are a small fellow. Why are you choosing to carry the heaviest load?" He replied, "I pick up the food bundles which are the heaviest, but the thing about the food bundle is that with every meal, the load becomes less and less. And on the last 2 days, I walked empty handed." Preparing the body is similar. Through yoga, you prepare the body to take on more of a karmic load. If you take more karmic load now, when you are well and capable, later you will walk hands free. There is nothing to carry and your life becomes beautiful. This is why the daily schedule in the Isaigo Center, as I pointed out earlier, is so rigorous. Physical activity here is too intense so as to burn up the allotted karma as soon as possible. As we know, each human being is born with different allotments of karma. These differences are sometimes apparent even in the mother's womb. As they grow up, each child is different. Based on this, the child's innate intelligence decides how much energy is to be allotted to different kinds of activity: physical, mental, emotional and meditative. Now let us say someone has chosen 40% of their physical activity, 40% of their emotional activity and 10% each of their intellectual and meditative activity. As a result, they are likely to be hyperactive mess. If someone like this comes to the center, I would put them into some intense physical activity for a few months. The idea is to burn up the energy allotted for physical activity in their allotted karma or prarabdha. Only after this energy is burned up will they be able to sit quietly and meditate. Most people cannot sit still if they do not first go through some intense activity. After that, life becomes much simpler. In any case, the life process itself burns up karma. Simply living and breathing destroy large volumes of it. So after this initial period of fire up activity, things become easier as long as people learn not to pick up a new load. In short, at the start you pick up the heaviest load, but like the food bundle, you know it will go away on the way. Of course, you just make sure you do not go picking up garbage. The aim is to burn up your allotted and then enjoy the delights of traveling light. Next point is common karmic frictions. People experience some common psychological frictions throughout their life. Frictions that they call stress. Stress is caused when people try to run their life engine without adequate lubrication. However, some basic yogic practices can offer the needed lubrication for everyone's life. There are more complex level of friction when the karmic inheritance does not fit well with one's physical body. For instance, when a certain karmic inheritance does not find the right kind of womb. There are always times when the energy body does not fit well into the physical body. For some reason, I see more such people in the east coast of America than in the west or the northern part of the India than in the south. This might be connected to the nature of the land itself, the kind of memory the geography carries, the general atmosphere on various historical factors. The practice of Hatha Yoga helps to knead the physical body as well as the entire system, including the karmic system, in a way that smooths these frictions out. After sustained Hatha Yoga practice, when you simply sit, you feel no sense of discomfort or stress. Now you can sit still if you want to, as well as negotiate the outside world with great ease and capability. Sometimes because of education, technology, altered social situation or a certain acquired competence, people are able to attain a state of well-being even though their current karmic situation does not allow it. They live lives that are way beyond their karmic blueprint. In short, they have been placed in far better life situation than their karma allows. At such times, it is very important to upgrade oneself. Otherwise, you will end up suffering your well-being. This is a common malaise in the world today. Most people's problem is not a life that is hellish, but a life that is too heavenly. These are the elements of privilege. People's system grow confused because the information within them say one thing but their life events say another. There are ways to address this malaise. Learning to live in gratitude is extremely important because it creates the right attitude. It is also vital to keep upgrading one's software, as it were. Daily Hatha Yoga and Kriya can help enormously to set karmic burdens, to upgrade one's system and adjust one's software. All these yogic sadhanas help one to maintain an inner state that is untouched by the outside. It does not matter whether you are in a palace or a hut, you are the same person. Wherever you are, you do the same thing. When you maintain this equanimity, you will see that situations around you keep getting better, but without karmic upgrading, old compulsions will overwhelm you. They will push you towards certain atmosphere and situation and will not permit you to come in terms with your new reality. Let's talk about the important sadhana related to this chapter. So, sadhana is, as we have seen earlier, karma builds itself on three fundamental levels: mental fluctuations, chemical reactions and sensations. The sensory body is the outmost manifestation of the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind is ruled by an enormous library of karmic memory. This karmic memory keeps manifesting all the time without your permission. Since it is an unconscious manifestation, it makes you look like a big mess, but once you make it conscious, it could be very useful information. On the 114 chakras, energy center in the human system, the karmic substance concentrates itself around some specific ones. These are related to certain joints and nodes in the body. Chemical deposits build up here over time. You may have tried mentally to alter certain simple habits, but you find that within a couple of days you fall back into them. It is not easy to come out of karmic limitations without simultaneously addressing them on the chemical and psychological levels. Hatha Yoga is a way of shedding karma with full awareness by moving and stretching the body in various ways. This requires training, however, so here is a simple practice that allows you to move from outer to inner, from body to mind, from outermost sensation to the chemical deposits within the body to the mind with its fixed ways of thinking and acting. Close your eyes, raise your hand in front of you to the level of your face and gently stretch the muscle in your hand without necessarily moving it mechanically. You will notice lots of sensation. Watch the sensation as keenly as you can. Stretch the hand fully Become aware of the 12th of every single muscle in your hand, twitch of every single muscle in your hand. If you are able to notice the minus minutest sensation in your hand, you are ready to do this for the entire body. Continue to keep your eyes closed. Now stretch every muscle in your body and observe the sensation. Do not turn this into a mechanical exercise. Allow yourself to make it a subtle dance-like movements, very gently extending every fiber in your body and observing every sensation. This simple process can help release chemical deposits in the body that have built up over time because of many shifts and fluctuations in thought and emotion. This is one way of releasing them, and in the process shedding karmic deposits as well. In the process, the very way you perceive and experience the world will be altered. Additionally, this is a useful way to start cultivating awareness. Generally, people inhabit the body in unawareness. Only when they experienced a toothache or a backache do they suddenly become aware of the body. The rest of the time, although the body is there, it is inhabited unconsciously. So one of the simplest way to begin cultivating awareness is to start with physical awareness. Awareness does not stop there. It deepens into various other dimensions, but starting with the body, which is a constant factor in your life, offers you an opportunity to practice maintaining your awareness continuously. Next point is karma and the elements. We have seen in part 1 how elemental memory plays a role in shaping the human being. 5 elements make up the human system, the planet, the solar system and the entire universe. Without them, there would be no creation. With just 5 elements, earth, water, fire and ether, think of the incredible diversity of life. We see millions and millions of manifestations around us, and no two individuals are ever the same. What makes this extraordinary diversity possible? It is the fact that the elements are highly receptive and have the capacity to acquire memory. Over time, a layer of information, or what we might call karmic substance, gather on each of these elements. Without these layers of specific information, each human being would not be so utterly unique. The elements play a major role, therefore, in perpetuating karma. Yoga has a system called Bhuta Suddhi, which is about cleansing the elements of accumulated information or karmic substance. The 5 elements imbibe and hold information. This information naturally creates intention. Once you have an intention, you naturally start moving in a particular direction. By cleansing the elements of this layer of information, Bhuta Suddhi is capable of transforming a human being in miraculous way. Every yogic practice, whether it is a posture, asana or other hatha yoga practice, or a breathing process, pranayama or kriya, internal action, is actually a way of cleansing the elements within us. But there is also a direct Bhuta Suddhi process that is hugely powerful way to clean up. This cannot be taught in a book because it is a process of transmission, not instruction. But it is important to introduce readers to the existence of this possibility because it is one of the most effective process of inner cleansing. I believe I have initiated more women into the process than has ever happened in the past, since the play of elements is different in sexes, particularly fire and water, which are dominant in the female system. The traditional Bhuta Suddhi process has been male oriented. However, by adapting it, we can make the same possibility available to both sexes. I believe this is necessary for our times in order to ensure that no one is excluded from the amazing transformative potential of this process. What makes this process significant is that over time, the element in your system will be in consonance with your intentions for life. They begin to function the way you want them to. Over time, this will also have some impact on the elements around you. Eastern medicinal system, including Ayurveda and Siddha, have always been based on the perception that no two human beings are alike. The way the elements function in one person is not the way they function in another. This makes them unique designer system of medicine that are hard to standardize. The doctor prescribes differently for each person because the treatment is based not on the ailment but on the individual's constitution. 5 different people with the same symptoms will be treated differently. A deep understanding of the elements underlies this. Several human beings, not necessarily spiritual in any way, have found a way to perform Bhuta Suddhi unconsciously. You may find people who are leaders in business or politics or art in the world who have the ability, when they enter a room, they change the atmosphere around them by their sheer presence. This is because of a certain amount of unconscious Bhuta Suddhi. What is done unconsciously, however, has greater power when done consciously. When Bhuta Suddhi is done consciously, the elements rearrange the way they function within you in a dramatic way. Bhuta Suddhi is actually the most fundamental level at which we can cleanse karma. People can decide to cleanse the mind one morning by trying to alter their attitudes, but by the afternoon they lapse back into old grooves of thinking. This is why yoga does not work solely with psychology. It is known that the human mind is notoriously unstable and given to oscillation. Yoga places greater faith in the physical. However, Bhuta Suddhi is a way of addressing the very root of your karma, the patterns and predispositions that determine the person you think you are. If you prune the tree, it will sprout back with a vengeance. But if you dig out the root, it will be gone. So Bhuta Suddhi is about radical transformation, not superficial change. It is about voluntarily relinquishing your compulsive hold and everything you have created, good, bad, ugly, so that the very source of creation can shine within you. Let's talk about important sadhana related to this. Human performance in any sphere is always gauged in comparison with someone else. If your capacity to perceive is better than another, you have a major advantage over them. For if you enhance your perpetual capability, or your ability to see the effectiveness of your action will be greatly enhanced. I often tell seekers that the aim is not to see something, but to simply learn to see. In order to enhance this perpetual ability, you could try a simple practice called the Akasi Mudra. You could do this practice particularly on those occasions when you feel you need to be at your best or to perform at your optimal capacity. There is a point of convergence in your energies body that stretches beyond the physical body. It is approximately 17 to 19 inches from the point below your eyebrows. You must search for a point where the vision meets at an acute angle of 11 degrees. Finding that point of convergence boosts the akasa or etheric element within you. The moment the element of akasa is dominant, you will find the clarity of your perception hugely. Next point is minimizing physical memory. In part 1, we looked at the insidious nature of physical memory or Runanubandha. Runanubandha is inevitable and vital for human survival, but beyond a point it can become a source of bondage. In a single lifetime, the volume of physical memory increases enormously. The reason is that people do not know how to manage and minimize the Runanubandha in the system. This is why traditions fixed a certain stability in norms and practices, whether in terms of having a single partner or something as simple as not accepting food or water in a stranger's home, irrespective of their caste or class background. In traditional home in India, people did not accept salt or lemon or sesame seeds from another hands. These substances are particularly effective carriers of memory. The premise was that the body remembers any kind of intimacy, not only with another physical body but with any physical substance. Some substances were considered to be more effective conductors of memory than others. For the same reason, in the yogic system, those who are into certain practices were asked to apply sandalwood paste or turmeric on the body. Others smeared earth on their body, a few others ash from a cremation grounds. This is not mere ceremony and superstition. Today's forensic science has developed to a point that it is possible to tell through thermal imagery exactly who sat in a place 72 hours ago. The temperature of the body actually leaves a thermal imprint. Dogs have always been capable of tracking people's down by picking up olfactory cues. Canine science is an old and advanced one. Every touch actually imparts a karmic imprint. Most people are not aware of this, but this imprint remains on a subtle level. One of the most sensitive areas of the body is the hands. By touching hands, Dunani Bandha is effectively transmitted from one person to another. Holding hands is considered to be an intimate gesture for this reason. This simple act can bring two people even closer than sexual activity can. When sexuality is paramount, the need to explore the other's body will be paramount. When you feel really close to someone, it often feels adequate to simply sit and hold hands. This is why the Indian tradition evolved the gesture of the namaskar of folded hands in greeting when you meet someone, rather than kissing or embracing or shaking hands with them. The aim was not to clutter your system with too many physical connections. The namaskar is a beautiful greeting because it is a deeply respectful acknowledgement of the source of creation within another person. If you look at a person's body or personality, you could either like or dislike it. This means a karmic pattern of craving and aversion is being set in motion. But when you bow down to the source of creation within someone, which is the same source that thrives within you, it means you acknowledge you shared an inherent divinity. You also ensure that you do not get entangled with yet another body through superfluous physical contact. The practice of touching a guru's feet arose from the same understanding. Like the hands, the soles of the feet are particularly sensitive. By touching the feet, the guru's energy could be transmitted to the disciple. An entire science exists around how the guru's feet should be touched to ensure the maximum benefit. Fortunately for me, most people do not really know the science. Although many Indians dive at my feet, they usually do not go beyond a token gesture. There are several other cleansing systems that make use of the purifying powers of the elements. In my own life, when I was into intense yogic practices, I would have somewhere between 5 to 7 showers a day. When your system becomes so sensitive, you become conscious of the impact of your physical contact with your body, from a hand that you touch to the very cushion you lean against. Traditionally, yogic took a dip in the river at least twice a day at the very minimum. Flowing water can help erase Nanubandha to a great extent. Interestingly, nature offers some natural ways to cleanse oneself of karmic cycles. At certain times of the year, in parts of the northern hemisphere, for instance, July and December, January, the elements of air and water are particularly strong and fluid. This allows one to cleanse oneself effortlessly. Karmic cycles that have become entrenched can be dropped by simply allowing the external elements to work upon you. Here is effortless Bhuta Suddhi that happens for free. During certain times, simply standing in the wind can work wonders as a cleansing process. If you try standing in a strong wind for half an hour, you will soon learn what a proper air wash can achieve. It can leave you feeling so much lighter and rejuvenated. These are times when grace is naturally on your side. Seizing this opportunity can be particularly beneficial for people who are stuck in a small karmic cycle. This is the right time to break free of small habits and niggling irritants in your life and see each day as a wonderful opportunity to step into unfamiliar terrain. Traditionally, fire was also used as a means of cleansing. The fire wash is used even days in many homes as a way of washing away negativity. These sensitivities developed because the entire tradition was oriented toward decluttering the system of the impressions gathered through random exposure of people, situations, and atmospheres. Even today in the Isha Yoga Center, the monks wash their clothes separately. Mixing up the clothes in a washing machine may be easier, but it is not done because each one is at a different level of spiritual attainment. This is also the reason why the monks in the East traditionally wore earth colors. They use a very finely sieved red earth to wash their clothes because this ensures that the only real Runanubandha you hold is with the earth, not with the people around you. It is a tangible testimony to your connection with the planet, a reminder of where the body comes from and where it will eventually go. The old songs and poems of the East, from the ancient love lyrics to pop songs in cinema, extolled lifetimes, janam janam, life after life, of togetherness not merely for romantic reasons. Continuity and stability were valorized because they ensured a firm and reliable basis to your life from which you could aspire to the ultimate. Marriage was not just about two people, little romance, and their little family. It is about two people coming together for their ultimate liberation. This is why so many traditions view marriage as sacrament. In traditional Hindu ritual, the mantras chanted while the couple circle the sacred fire is about consecrating the relationship and energy of the two people so that they can both grow together to their ultimate possibility. Today at ISA, we are conducting what is known as the Bhuta Suddhi Vivaha. This is a marriage based on bringing about an elemental cohesiveness between two people. In a world where couples see relationship as more and more hard work, where love has become labor, this kind of marriage creates harmony on the most fundamental level possible, making it a more lubricated and graceful partnership. When a certain stability in physical, genetic, emotional, and social relationship is attained, individual human life can grow to its peak. When there is instability, the physical memory grows confused and over a period of time can create serious psychological and physiological imbalances. If your ultimate aim is liberation, if your ultimate aspiration is to evolve into a divine possibility, this stability offers you an unwavering foundation from which you can extend yourself towards your final destination. Let's talk about important sadhana related to this. The physical world is a product of polarities, masculine and feminine, yin and yang, Ida and Pingala, Shiva and Shakti, right brain and left brain. The longing to find the union of polarities find expression through ambition, conquest, love, sex and yoga. Yoga, as we all know, means union. The simplest form of yoga is to put your hands together to Namaskar. Namaskar brings harmony between the two polarities within you. Try putting your hands together, bringing both forms together in proper alignment and looking at someone or something with loving attention. In 3 to 5 minutes, you will begin to harmonize. Namaskar yourself into peace. Namaskar yourself into love. Namaskar yourself into union. Let us put our hands together and unite the world. May you unfold your being with folded hands. Next point is spirituality and fast forward karma. When you consciously seek freedom from karma through a spiritual practice, you are essentially on fast forward. When you churn up your inner life, certain dimensions of your karma comes to the fore. At such juncture, it is possible to experience intense pain or discomfort. Of course, this could mean that you have contracted some ailment, but frequently this is just your past karma surfacing and manifesting itself in one way or another. The whole point of the spiritual process is to take on more of a karmic load than your allotted one in order to finish off as much as possible. It means you do not want to keep repeating the same cycle again and again. So if you are in an active spiritual process, you may find everything moving at a bewildering pace. Physical troubles that used to beset your every 6 months are now coming up every 6 hours. This is only because you have chosen to work out every karma as soon as possible. You are choosing not to live a sanitized life that regards spirituality as mere placidity. If your karma were to unwind slowly, it would probably recreate small etches over a long period of time. But the fast forward of karma often means you might experience intense pain fleetingly. Many people have been less alive and less joyful and their lives slower and more apathetic because they experience low level pain for stretches of time. A spiritual journey simply cranks up the process, so what might have spread over 3 months or a year happens in a few moments. It is important to allow this fast forward karmic process to happen. Do not suppress it. It is wisest to let your physical body burn up your allotted karma as soon as possible. The basis of Hatha Yoga is just this. You learn to handle pain in the same way as you handle pleasure. If you learn this, you achieve an equanimity that will carry you beyond the turbulence of the karmic process. In yoga, the practice of kriya often hastens the karmic processes without interfering with it. When you put chemicals into the system, however, you are creating another karma for which you pay a price in the future. Those who are meditative will experience deep levels of joy, but this also opens them up to deep levels of pain. This pain is only for a short duration, however, because their higher level of awareness allows them to work it out more quickly. When you go into deeper levels of meditation, if you take a single wrong step, the effect manifests itself immediately and you will have to correct it. But for the person who lives in relative unawareness, the process may be slow but much deeper. What takes a lifetime could be over on this very day for the spiritually aware person because they immediately take corrective measures. If you become meditative and still carry negativity, your negative karmas become 1,000 times more powerful because you have become that much more sensitive and deceptive. Suppose you cultivate the soil and enrich it with manure. The crops will grow well, but the same manure will also enable weeds to grow. Similarly, when you cultivate a meditative state and allow negative emotion to flourish, inner suffering increases dramatically. It is important to be extra cautious about weeding when you are in such a state. Otherwise, you will be left with a forest of weeds and no crop. The reason those on the spiritual path have a daily practice is just this: to ensure that karma stagnation does not happen. You may already have noticed that if you have a daily practice and you stop it for 6 months, many recurrent issues, physical, psychological and social, that have not bothered you for a while start returning. This is how the karma cycle works. You may have believed you were transformed, but you will suddenly find all kinds of compulsive behaviors returning with a vengeance. Only practice or sadhana helps break the cyclical movement of life. So, this is the end of chapter 7. I hope you gain some knowledge, some perspective, some beautiful ideas and experience about the karma from this chapter. So, keep learning, keep enjoying. Namaskaram. Thank you.